The truck from Hargrove Property Management arrived at 7:14 on Christmas morning. 3 men. A locksmith's van behind it. The street was still dark at the edges, the way December streets are dark before the sun decides to commit, and every house on Alderman Road had its porch light on, and its curtains closed, and its families somewhere inside, doing the particular quiet work of Christmas morning. Every house except one. The one they had come for was a gray 2-story at the end of the cul-de-sac, with a single wreath on the door that had gone brown at one corner, and a porch railing that needed paint, and a truck in the driveway that had not moved in 4 days because the man who owned it had not been able to move it. He was 83 years old, and he had lived in that house for 51 years, and he was sitting in the kitchen in his robe when he heard the first truck door slam. He did not get up right away. He had known this morning was coming. He had known it for 6 months, and had spent 6 months believing something would change. The way people who have never needed rescue believe that rescue arrives automatically to people who deserve it. The locksmith was already on the porch when the second truck door opened and a different sound entered the morning. Not a slam, but the clean drop of large paws on frozen pavement, and then boots, and then a voice that said with complete calm and 0 volume, "Step back from that door." Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story moves you, please subscribe and stay with us until the very end. What that old man was hiding, and what it cost him, is something we promise you will not see coming. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Maddox, Usum, retired, had been returning from a gas station run at 7:09 on Christmas morning because he had forgotten coffee filters the night before, and his sister was arriving at 10, and he was not willing to face that particular conversation without coffee. He had been living on Alderman Road for 14 months, in the rental 2 houses down from Walter Pruitt's gray 2-story, and he had spent most of those 14 months in the specific way that men like him inhabit spaces between whatever they were and whatever comes next. Present but not settled, alert but not at home. He was 42 years old and carried it in the way men who have done serious work carry their age, not as decline, but as evidence. He was 6'1", 215 pounds of it, with short dark hair and a face that had been handsome before Helmand and was still handsome after, just with more information in it. His eyes were a pale, clear green that people occasionally mentioned with the slight puzzlement of someone who expected the eyes of a man like him to be a more serious color, as if green were too calm for the rest of the architecture. They were not calm. They were precise. They moved the way a scope moves, quietly, continuously, without hurry and without rest. He had served for 17 years with the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion before a spinal injury in 2020 had settled the question his body had been arguing with him about for 2 years. 2 deployments to Helmand, 1 to Syria. 1 classified operation he would carry to his grave with the particular private dignity of men who understand that some things are held rather than shared. He had come home to Calder, Montana, his father's town, if not quite his own, with a medical separation, a combat action ribbon, and the ingrained habit of rising at 0530 that 14 months of civilian life had not meaningfully disturbed. He was not broken. He was between. He had work lined up in the spring with a veterans housing nonprofit and a sister who called twice a week, and a German shepherd who had decided, without consulting anyone, that Cole Maddox was the correct person, and was not revisiting that decision. Shadow was a 6-year-old German shepherd, 89 pounds, with a coat so deeply black it caught light in the way of polished stone rather than fur. A true unbroken black from nose to tail tip, except for a wash of dark mahogany along his flanks in direct sun, visible only at the right angle, like a color only certain light was privileged to see. His right ear had been torn and reattached, during a building clearance in Helmand Province. Not cosmetically repaired, but functionally healed, with a fold at the upper third that gave it the particular shape of something that had been tested, and it held. He moved with the dense, grounded economy of a dog who had been trained to navigate spaces where noise was dangerous and hesitation was dangerous, and the margin between those two things was where you live. He had been Cole since the adoption finalized 11 months ago, and in 11 months he had slept in the hallway outside Cole's door exactly 0 times, because he had evaluated the situation on night 1 and determined that the hallway was the wrong answer. He rode in the passenger seat of Cole's truck with his eyes forward and his ears rotating at intervals like a system running continuous background diagnostics. And this morning, on Alderman Road at 7:14, his ears had stopped rotating and fixed. Cole pulled the truck over when he saw the vehicles. He was already out of the truck before he had fully processed what he was seeing. The Hargrove Property Management logo on the door, the locksmith van, the 3 men with their clipboard and their Tuesday morning faces, which on Christmas morning looked obscene in a way he didn't immediately have words for. Shadow landed beside him in the cold and did not wait. He read the scene with the total efficiency of a system designed for exactly this. The body language of 3 men with authority they were about to use on a person who had not asked for them. The porch light still on above a wreath going brown. The single truck in the driveway that had not moved in days. Shadow's ears came forward and locked. His movement toward the porch was not fast. It was deliberate, which was more frightening than fast, because it communicated a dog that had already decided and was simply arriving at the conclusion. Cole moved with him, not running, not urgent in any theatrical sense, just the particular ground-covering stride of a man who has covered ground professionally and understands that urgency announced is urgency wasted. He put himself between the locksmith and the front door with the unhurried certainty of a man who has occupied contested spaces and understands that position is the first argument. "Step back from that door," he said. The locksmith stepped back, not because of the words, because of Shadow, who had positioned himself 12 inches to Cole's left and was looking at the locksmith with the focused, unblinking attention of a system that had completed its assessment and was waiting on instructions. The locksmith was a practical man. He stepped back. The Hargrove representative was a younger man named Beckford, mid-30s, in a company jacket with his collar turned up against the cold. He had a clipboard with a legal document on it, and the expression of someone who had been told this was a routine property action and was now revising that characterization. "Sir, this is a legal foreclosure proceeding," Beckford said. He said it with the particular firmness of a person reciting something they have memorized for exactly this scenario. The property owner has been in default for 6 months on a Hargrove acquisition loan. All proper legal notices have been filed and served. On Christmas morning, Cole said. The legal date for action is December 25th. I understand what it is, Cole said. He was not angry. His voice had the flat, measured quality of someone operating well inside their capacity. "I'm asking you to step off this porch while I speak to the resident. You'll wait at your vehicle. Both of you." Beckford looked at him. He looked at Shadow. He looked back at his clipboard, which offered no useful counsel, and descended the porch steps. Walter Pruitt opened the door before Cole knocked. He had heard all of it through the window beside the door, the one with the cardboard taped over the crack where the seal had failed. He was a small man, 83 years old, in a bathrobe that had seen better decades and slippers that had seen worse. He had a full head of white hair, neatly combed even at 7 a.m. on Christmas, which told you something about who he was before the robe and the slippers had become his uniform. His face was the face of a man who had been handsome and deliberate, and who had been worn by the last 2 years into something that still carried the structure of who he had been, while showing, plainly, what the wearing had cost. His eyes were dark blue and direct and full of the particular shame of a man who has always managed his own affairs and has run out of road. "Cole," he said. Walter looked past him at the Hargrove truck and the locksmith's van and the two men standing at the bumper in the cold. And then he looked back at Cole and said, with the quiet of a man who has spent 6 months not saying this to anyone, "I didn't want to ask." Cole looked at him for a moment. "I know," he said. "You want to tell me what happened?" What happened was Arthur, Walter's son Arthur Pruitt, was 54 years old and had been managing his father's finances since Walter's wife Margaret had died 3 years ago, and Walter had spent 6 months in the particular gray country that follows the loss of a 50-year partnership and had emerged from it. Functional but diminished in the practical ways. The bills, the paperwork, the chain of small competencies that Margaret had managed with the invisible efficiency of a woman who loved her husband and understood that love was partly administrative. Arthur had moved quickly. He was plausible in the way that children of aging parents can be plausible, attentive at the right moments, reassuring in the right register, present enough to establish trust and absent enough to avoid scrutiny. He had a good voice for phone calls and a firm handshake, and he wore his concern for his father the way certain men wear a watch, as a credential rather than a feeling. He had visited 4 times in the first month after Margaret died, then twice a month, then once, then on the phone. The visits had tapered, but the management had not. If anything, it had deepened, because Walter, alone in the house and struggling with the paperwork and quietly ashamed of the struggling, had needed someone to handle things. And Arthur had been there to handle them in the way a hand extended over a hole in the ice is there. And Walter had not thought to ask whether the hand intended to pull him up or hold him under. He had consolidated Walter's accounts for ease of management. He had refinanced the house through a Hargrove subsidiary to free up equity for Walter's retirement comfort. He had told Walter the payments were being handled. He had been telling Walter this for 14 months while directing the money elsewhere, and what he had directed it toward was a sports betting operation in Billings that had consumed $43,000 of Walter Pruitt's retirement savings and left behind a default notice, a Hargrove acquisition loan at predatory terms, and a silence that Arthur had maintained with the specific ruthlessness of a man who had decided his own difficulty outweighed his father's. The house on Alderman Road where Walter had raised him, where Margaret had made his birthday cakes for 30 years, where Arthur himself had learned to throw a ball in the backyard and had been carried to bed after falling asleep on the couch. That house had become, in Arthur's accounting, an asset to be managed, a line item, a problem that Christmas morning would resolve. Walter had discovered the truth 11 weeks ago when a statement arrived at the house addressed to him rather than forwarded to Arthur's address. And he had opened it with the mild attention of a man who expected routine information and had received instead the precise shape of his ruin. He had not told anyone. He had not called the police, had not contacted an attorney, had not knocked on the door of the neighbor 2 houses down who sometimes helped him carry groceries to the truck. He had sat with it the way men of his generation sit with the things they cannot reconcile, alone, at the kitchen table, in the belief that the fault was partly his for trusting, and that the shame was therefore partly his to carry, and in the deeper, quieter belief that a man who calls his son a thief is a man who has failed at something more fundamental than money. "He's my son," Walter said. They were at the kitchen table now, the cold coffee between them, Shadow lying across the threshold of the kitchen with his chin on his forepaws and his eyes open. "I kept thinking he'd—" Walter stopped. He put his hands flat on the table. "I kept thinking he'd fix it." Cole looked at the documents Walter had pulled from the kitchen drawer, the Hargrove loan agreement, the account statements, the default notices in their certified mail envelopes, unopened for 3 weeks, because Walter had stopped being able to open them. Cole read through them with the focused economy of a man who had spent 17 years reading intelligence reports and knew how to find the operative fact in a document designed to obscure it. The loan was predatory by any reading. The interest rate was 22%, applied to a refinanced principal that had absorbed fees that should never have been authorized. The authorization signature was Arthur's, not Walter's. Walter had signed one document, a general power of attorney for financial management, and Arthur had used it for everything thereafter. Cole took out his phone. He called Marcus Webb first, a real estate attorney in Calder who had done the lease paperwork when Cole moved in, and who picked up on the fourth ring sounding like a man who had been awake for some time because he had children, and it was Christmas morning. Cole apologized for the hour. He described the Hargrove loan in the specific terms that mattered legally. Webb was quiet for a moment, and then said, "That signature issue is serious. Tell them nothing is being transferred today." Cole said he already had. Webb said he would make 2 calls and call back. The second call was to Deputy Karen Ashworth at the Calder County Sheriff's Department, who Cole knew from 18 months of being the kind of neighbor who noticed things. He described the account transfers, the power of attorney, the $43,000, and Arthur's name and last known address in Billings. Ashworth was quiet for the same length of time Webb had been, and then said, in the measured voice of a law enforcement professional arriving at a professional conclusion, "I'll need to see those statements. Can you photograph them and send them to my number?" Cole photographed them at the kitchen table, while Walter made fresh coffee he didn't ask for, and Shadow accepted a tentative hand on his back from an 83-year-old man who needed something solid to touch. Beckford knocked on the door at 8:05. Cole opened it and told him, with the same flat calm he had used on the porch, that the authorization signature on the Hargrove loan was currently under review by a licensed real estate attorney for potential unauthorized use of power of attorney, that a sheriff's deputy had been notified regarding financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and that any attempt to execute the property transfer while those reviews were active would expose Hargrove Property Management to significant civil liability. He said this the way he briefed, factually, completely, without performance. He handed Beckford Marcus Webb's business card. Beckford looked at the card. He looked at Cole. He looked at Shadow, who was standing just behind Cole's left shoulder with his ears forward and his expression one of professional interest. Beckford went back to his truck and made a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. When he ended the call, he drove away without speaking again. The locksmith had already gone. Walter was at the kitchen table when Cole came back inside. He was looking at the coffee in front of him. Shadow walked to his chair and put his head against Walter's knee without instruction, and Walter's hand went to the dog's neck and held there. "I should have told someone," Walter said. "You told me now," Cole said. He sat down across the table. "That's what counts." Arthur Pruitt was arrested in Billings on December 28th. The charges were financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and criminal misuse of power of attorney. The forensic audit of the accounts, completed over the following 3 months, documented $43,200 in unauthorized transfers. His attorney negotiated a plea arrangement that carried mandatory full restitution, 2 years of supervised probation, and a permanent bar from serving as financial agent for any family member. He lost his apartment in March. The Hargrove loan was voided in February on the basis of unauthorized authorization, a determination that Marcus Webb reached without billing Walter for the first 12 hours of work, which he mentioned once and did not mention again. Walter Pruitt stayed in the gray two-story on Alderman Road. He repainted the porch railing in April, which Cole helped him with on a Saturday morning that ran long and ended with coffee on the porch, and Shadow sprawled between their chairs on the new painted boards in the particular boneless ease of a large dog, who is determined that the present moment requires nothing of him. Walter had not spoken to Arthur since the arrest, and had not decided whether he would. Cole did not offer an opinion on this. It was not his to offer. On Christmas morning the following year, Cole found a card in his mailbox. It was a simple card, the kind from a drugstore rack, with a winter scene on the front. Inside, in the careful hand of a man who had learned penmanship when penmanship was still character evidence, Walter had written, "You gave me back my house. But what you really gave me back was the part of me that believed someone would show up." I had stopped believing that. Merry Christmas, Cole. Give Shadow a piece of whatever you're having. Cole read it at the kitchen table with his coffee. Shadow was sitting beside the table in the patient, upright way he sat when he believed something was about to be offered to him. Cole looked at the card and then at the dog, and he tore off the corner of his toast and held it out, and Shadow took it with the delicate precision of a dog who understood that some things were ceremonial and treated them accordingly. Sometimes God does not remove the wolves from the door. Sometimes he places a man 2 houses down who forgot coffee filters on Christmas morning and came home at exactly the right moment. Not by accident. By the particular providence of a God who knows that good people sit alone with their shame and their certified mail envelopes, and their belief that asking is a form of weakness, and who sends someone who does not wait to be asked. There are old men on streets like Alderman Road in every city and town in this country, men who built things and kept things and lost things in the quiet way that good people lose things, to the people they trusted most. They are not asking for help. They are sitting in their kitchens on Christmas morning, listening to the sound of a truck door, believing that no one is coming. Sometimes the bravest thing is to step out of your own truck in the cold and put yourself between a man and the worst morning of his life and say, simply and without hesitation, step back from that door. If Walter's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that neighbors are not accidents. They are providence. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us this: have you ever arrived somewhere at exactly the right moment without meaning to? Your story might be the one that reminds someone else to pay attention to the mornings they almost didn't stop. If you believe in stories of courage, loyalty, and the quiet justice that finds its way to people who deserve it, please subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, and keep you watchful. Because somewhere nearby, someone is listening for the sound of a truck door opening.